In the gig economy, regardless if you're in ride sharing, driving for Uber or Lyft, or engaging in any of the food delivery services, Grubhub, Uber Eats, DoorDash, one thing is apparent across the board. We all work for tips. And anytime there is a change, a reduction, or an issue with tipping, we need to talk. What up, folks? Once again, it is your boy Tim with another ride sharing video. Now, I want to separate delivery of food products from ride sharing with passengers for the simple fact that the tipping in food delivery has always been significantly better than it is in ride sharing. And I invite my veteran drivers in the comments to let me know if you see or have heard of anything different. But in the food delivery business, they do have issues with tipping as well. We can talk about tip baiting, where you encourage a driver to take a food delivery order on the guise that he's going to receive a very high tip, and then all of a sudden he makes the delivery and the tip is retracted from him. That is a food delivery issue, but we're not going to really discuss food delivery issues in regards to tipping. We're going to be talking more about issues in ride sharing, driving for Uber or Lyft. And for the sake of this video, I'm going to admit it's predominantly Uber, because Uber is the grandfather of ride sharing. They created this industry, and for the most part, Lyft just follows along with whatever the hell Uber does. So for the most part, we're discussing Uber. So why the hell are tips being reduced? Why are drivers complaining that they're not receiving shit when they're taking passengers from point A to point B? Veteran driver here, been driving off and on between jobs since 2014, since the very beginning in my market. Thousands of trips under my belt. Going to give you the top 3 reasons why tipping in the ride-sharing industry has turned to shit. Number 1, starting with Uber. This is probably the most predominant reason why tipping never has been significant in the ride-sharing industry. And that is because Uber started out by telling passengers tipping is not required and the driver does not expect to be tipped. They also discourage drivers from taking tips. Any of my veteran drivers in the comments, if you've been driving 2015 or before, you will remember a time when many drivers were hesitant to even take tips from passengers. I've had passengers tell me, could we stop at an ATM so I could get you some extra money out to tip you? Because in the business, for the first 3 or 4 years, Uber did not even allow passengers to tip through the app. I believe they started allowing tipping in about 2017, several years after ride sharing was already a business. So in the beginning, passengers could not even tip if they wanted to. Now, any of us old enough to remember the taxi industry, we all will remember tipping was quite normal in the taxi business. Uber came along, significantly undercut the fares that folks were paying to ride in the taxi. You could ride in the Uber for a hell of a lot cheaper. And they were telling the passengers you didn't have to tip. Some would even suggest that the tip was in the fare. None of this was true. But the point is simple. It destroyed the tipping culture of tipping drivers, from the taxi business to the ride-sharing business. Not allowing passengers to tip for several years. By the time Uber decided to let folks tip, tipping culture had been destroyed. So that is by far the biggest reason why tipping in ride sharing is so poor, is that the company that invented ride sharing discouraged people from tipping, disincentivized drivers from taking tips, and told folks overall you didn't have to tip at all. There were some smaller strikes back in the day, particularly in New York, where they won the right to be tipped through the app. And Uber undermined even all of that by sending emails to the passengers, backdoor emails telling them you still don't have to tip. So Uber fought hard against tipping drivers for years. By the time they lifted that mentality, the culture of tipping in this business was changed. So that's number 1 and by far the biggest reason there is as to why drivers don't get tipped much. It is Uber themselves. Number 2, rising prices. Now, Uber and Lyft to some degree operate on a bait and switch mantra, meaning what they offer you today to get you to do something is not what you're going to be offered tomorrow if you continue doing it. What I mean by that is we'll give passengers very low rates to get them away from the taxi business to use Uber. Once they start getting to the point where they rely on Uber, we'll raise the rates up. Same thing with drivers. We'll give drivers a very high cut of the fares to get them to start driving for Uber or Lyft. Once they start driving, we will slowly reduce their salaries. Anybody that's been in ride sharing for any length of time can tell you this is a matter of fact. I say it in every video. I used to earn $2.20 per mile in my market back in the heydays. It's now 72 cents. That is bait and switch over and over again. In modern times, you will see things like earnings guarantees, surges, bonuses, streak bonuses. You'll see all of that stuff if you are a new driver much higher than it will be a year or two into the business. Everything they offer you will ultimately be reduced the longer you drive, the longer you continue doing it. Every driver in this business that has been driving even for a year or longer has seen a reduction in pay. And of course, the passengers are seeing a continuing rise of fares. So how does this relate to tipping? Well, if a passenger gets in your vehicle and the fares keep going up, they tend to not want to tip. Under the guise, well, shit, you guys are taking a bunch of money from me already. The fare is not even that cheap anymore. So I'm not going to tip you if I'm not getting anything special. Hell, I could ride a taxi and damn near pay the same I'm paying you guys with Uber. So the higher the prices keep going up, the less likely passengers are going to tip. And the fares have continued to go up to the point where some passengers now get into vehicles with us drivers and complain about the fares. Some of my drivers in the comments, have you had someone get in the vehicle and complain to you about rising fares? I used to catch this trip all the time. It was $6. Now it's $9. Passengers are complaining to us drivers even though we don't have a damn thing to do with it. I made a video not long ago of a passenger actually committing an act of violence to a driver because he was complaining about the fare. So rising prices is the second reason tips are being reduced. Passengers don't like constantly having to pay more and more for the same thing. And last but not least, sheer ignorance of the passengers. In the restaurant business, where tipping is highly common, we all know when we go to a restaurant that the waitresses make a very small base salary. We know that. If you go to Olive Garden and you pay $30 for a meal, we know during that hour that the waitress served you, they probably earned $5 or $6, maybe even less, Their base hourly salary is generally less than minimum wage. We know that. That's not a secret. We are not ignorant to the fact that waitresses make very little salary. So it encourages us to tip them because we know their base salary is not much. You know the person that is making your meal, making you happy, serving your plate, going and getting your soda or whatever the hell it may be, is not making much. So it encourages you to tip a bit more. In ride sharing, the passengers are quite ignorant to how much the drivers actually make. Most passengers are unaware that the driver is only getting between 20 to maybe 40% of the fare they pay. Many passengers believe we damn near receive a whole damn fare. If they pay $10, they assume the driver is probably getting at least 8 or 9 of that. It's their car, their fuel, their insurance. Why wouldn't they get most of the money? Most passengers will be shocked to find out that if they paid a $10 fare, the driver may be getting $3 or $4 of that. But that's reality on almost all of the trips. So in regards to ignorance, I highly believe, as many other drivers do, that if the passengers actually knew how little of the fare was going to the drivers, they would be encouraged to tip more. Shit, some of them might even be encouraged to do a side deal altogether. No one thinks it's fair that the business sitting back with an app absorbing virtually none of the overhead of getting a trip to take place should get 80% of the fare. There's virtually no one that thinks that that makes sense, that you're not paying for the fuel, the car, the insurance, the registration, taking any of the safety risk of driving from point A to point B, but yet you're getting 80% of the fare. No one thinks that that makes sense. But that is the case, and the more passengers that know about that would probably encourage tipping. Those are my 3 issues. I want to hear from some of you drivers. Do you think I missed something? Do you think I overstated something? Particularly veteran drivers, you've been in the business long enough to know why the hell we're not receiving many tips these days. I will add a side note, and I'm going to say a side note because some of this is allegedly. There has been lawsuits, so some of it has been settled. But Uber has been known to steal tips outright, not even pass on the tips that passengers give through the app to the driver. That's a different argument, though. Nevertheless, it is your boy Tim. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.